It's 104.9 Coyote Country. Good morning. I'm Robert Miguel, as always, and with me on the phone from Dallas, Texas, professional Q&A moderator and speaker, film critic at BigFanboy.com, and show director at the Dallas Comic Show, Mark Walters. Good morning, sir.
Robert, I'm just going to start taking you around with me so you can introduce me to people and say that exact same introduction every time.
I tell you what, I'm kind of nailing it now. I'm proud of myself, actually. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. What's up, man?
No, I'm excited, man. I've been looking forward to this one all week because you did. Now, I believe Justice League's already in theaters now. Like, didn't it come out Thursday officially, or was it even Wednesday?
They did some sort of, I think there's like an early evening release or something. So by the time, people hear this, I'm sure that there will have been a certain contingency of people that have seen it.
Yeah, for these big ones, sometimes they give you a little extra, day or two because I guess they just want to get that all in on the weekend of revenue. So probably a good idea. So Justice League is in theaters now, and you did attend the, Dallas screening, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we had a screening. We had a couple of screenings this week. We did one on Monday and one on Tuesday, and yeah, I got to see it on Monday, and I actually had to kind of sit on that because the review embargo was held until the Wednesday morning. So we couldn't post a review. We couldn't talk about it. We couldn't say anything, which, I mean, that's typical about films. Sometimes you get those review embargoes and you have to wait. So, yeah, it's been kind of fun having to sit on my hands and not say anything about this movie. But yeah, I'm glad. It's great we can finally talk about it now.
Well, release the Kraken. Let's go, man. Tell us what is going on with Justice League, the movie.
It's interesting because when I was writing my review, one of the things I talked about was kind of the history of the DC Comics movies on the big screen and how, when we finished up the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy and went into Man of Steel, and it really sort of redefined the look and the feel and the style and the tone of what the DC cinematic universe was going to be. And, of course, Man of Steel was successful, but it had its own critics. And then when Batman vs. Superman came out last year, and again, it was one of those things where, like, certain people thought it was great, certain people thought it was terrible, or a lot of people said it was too dour, it was too dark. And so, it was one of those things where the studio was going to take those notes going into whatever was next and try to apply it accordingly. And then the next film ended up being Wonder Woman, which is now the highest-grossing superhero movie of all time. So I'm sure that puts, kind of added pressure in the sense of, it's a great lead-in because they're coming off of a highly successful and very well-liked film, but that film also has kind of raised the bar for them, so now it's going to be trickier for them going into this. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of news reports about what's been going on with Justice League. Zack Snyder stepped down after he finished shooting the film, and Joss Whedon came in to finish the film and also do the editing of the film. And one of the things that is immediately obvious when you see Justice League is that it does feel like a very heavily edited film. It feels like a film that probably had a lot more in it, but was cut down to run under 2 hours. And there's certain sequences where you can really see that. There's certain sequences where it's like, wow, okay, obviously there was supposed to be some dialogue there, and they cut it. Or there was supposed to be another scene there, and they cut it. There's well-known actors that pop up in the movie that literally don't have a single line of dialogue. And as an audience member, you're looking at that thinking, all right, that's not right. Like,
he's
that
an
actor
extra.
wouldn't have been in the movie unless they were going to have a line.
Right.
So there's certain moments like that where it does sort of stick out. You can tell that they had certain reasons or certain issues doing certain things in the film to kind of get it down. And I'm sure a lot of that was just they wanted it to be under 2 hours. I think they wanted it to have a respectable running time. They didn't want it to be this overly long thing, because that's one of the things that I always notice now when I go back and watch, like Batman vs. Superman or even Man of Steel, which both of those films I kind of like. They're both kind of unnecessarily long, and I think that maybe they're realizing that that's one of the mistakes that they're making is these movies they're turning out to be too long, and they need to try to cut it down. Because let's face it, the audience that you're appealing to, they're not sitting there wanting a 3-hour epic movie. They want to watch the movie, be entertained, and go home and talk about it.
Right.
And so I think that it was smart in the sense that that Whedon edited it in a respectable way to where the running time is not ridiculous. But I do feel like the movie kind of suffers for that, because I think there are certain moments in the film that probably could have had a little more weight to them or felt a little bit meatier if there had been more to the scene. I talk about this also in my review on BigFanboy.com, but one of the things that, when I was describing this to a friend of mine, they said, how would you describe Justice League? I said, well, it's like watching a really good superhero movie, but only watching the action scenes. It's like if you cut out like all the story stuff and just watch the action scene, that's kind of what this feels like. It feels like you're missing some of the weightiness to it. You're missing some of the gravitas that it could have had and probably should have had. It should have been a much bigger and much more epic movie. Now, that said, it's not a bad film. It's actually rather entertaining, and it's actually quite fun in a lot of places too, which I was kind of surprised by. The characters are really great. The interaction between the main characters is great. The banter that they have back and forth, and especially the scenes where they're kind of assisting one another and helping each other fight the enemy. Some of that stuff's really, really good. And for comic book fans, I think comic book fans will be especially pleased at how that's handled in the film. Aquaman is really, really funny and really great. He's a good character, really solid character. I think a lot of people are going to love Jason Momoa in this film.
And what about the Flash?
Movie. He's just Barry Allen. He hasn't quite become the Flash yet. So this is kind of his training day, I guess, if you will. But he's really, really funny. He's a great comic relief in the movie. Ray Fisher as Cyborg is okay, not great. They probably could have done a couple different things with his character that would have made him better. But it's hard playing a character like that because he's not a very happy guy,
right?
And sometimes that sort of bitterness and dourness that he portrays in the film, it can wane on you a little bit. Gal Gadot, of course, is great as Wonder Woman. Here's the big surprise: the one thing that I thought was kind of weak was Ben Affleck as Batman. As great as he was in Batman versus Superman, playing that really dark and gritty version of The Dark Knight. In this film, he's not quite as good. Like he's actually a little goofy in certain scenes, which I was a little surprised by that. And I don't know if that was something that they went back and added in because they wanted to make it lighter, or if they felt like the character in Batman versus Superman was too dark, or if it was like they needed to appeal more to kids. But there's a couple moments in this film where Batman just doesn't quite click, and something that I didn't really think about, which I've never had a problem with this in the comics. I guess in the comics they always handled it smartly, but watching Batman fight alongside these 4 other super-powered people, he looks kind of weak and pointless, which is something I wasn't really expecting, because it's like he's the one guy that doesn't have any superpowers. He's the one guy that he really can't, other than just throwing things and kicking people around or whatever. These other guys are like ripping people in half and blasting them and like doing all sorts of stuff with their superpowers. And Batman's just kind of there, like trying his best to keep up.
He's got a utility belt.
He's got his utility belt and his bat cars and his bat planes and all that stuff.
And bat-shaped boomerangs. Wow, yeah.
One other thing I did want to talk about, because a lot of people have been asking about it. Everybody wants to know, so what's the deal with Superman in this movie? Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, right.
Because it's a major major spoiler to talk about it.
Okay.
But I think it's also safe to say that if you've watched any of the interviews, or if you've watched any of the press kit or any of the online stuff, it's no mystery that Henry Cavill is in this movie, and he's not going to be in the movie unless he's playing Superman in some form, right?
Right.
I think it's safe to say that yes, you will see some Superman stuff in this movie. And being a hardcore Superman fan, I'm a huge Superman fan. I can tell you this. There are certain things that they do in revolving around that character that are extremely frustrating in this film. And there are certain things that they do that are extremely satisfying.
Okay.
And I'll leave it at that.
Hey, one other question. Hey, are we ever going to get an invisible plane with Wonder Woman?
Well, okay. I've got a theory about that, because somebody else brought that up to me, and they said, so I guess that invisible plane, there's probably no way that they could ever make that work, right? I said, well, here's my theory on that. Batman, and especially in this new Justice League movie, and I think a lot of people will understand it once they see it, Batman has kind of become like the Tony Stark of the DC movies, right? He's like the high-tech billionaire guy. Batman and Wonder Woman are developing somewhat of a relationship, and you'll see that in this new film. You'll see that there's not so much like a romantic relationship, but there is some, a little bit of tension between those two that basically alludes to the idea that their relationship is becoming close, and they're becoming very involved with one another, just on a work level. And so my theory is this: if the filmmakers decided that they wanted to have an invisible jet for Wonder Woman in the movie, just as fan service or a nod to the classic lore of Wonder Woman or whatever reason you wanted to have it.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't it stand to reason that Bruce Wayne could somehow come up with a technology to make an invisible jet for Wonder Woman to fly around in?
Oh, heck yeah.
There you go. Maybe at some point we might actually see that. Of course, a lot of that's going to depend on whether or not Ben decides to stick around and play Batman again.
Right, yeah. So what's going on in that rumor mill with Ben Affleck and what's with these Batmen? I mean, seriously, it seems like every couple of movies are like, maybe not, we'll see.
Yeah, let's shift gears and talk about that a little bit. Well, it's interesting because my initial question on this, when it was first brought up that Ben Affleck wasn't sure if he was going to stick around and play Batman much longer, my initial thought was, why is it that these studios and these filmmakers are not signing these actors to multi-picture deals to prevent this kind of stuff from going on? Like, why are they not basically securing themselves and preventing this from happening? Because this happens a lot. This happens more often than it should. You know, I mean, it happened with Batman. It happened with it's happened with James Bond. So when these guys sit down to do these contract negotiations, are they not trying to protect themselves and figure out, okay, we know we're going to make, 6 or 7 movies. There, over the course of so many years, there's going to be, this many Batman movies. We're going to have Batman appear in this many other movies, as like appearances and whatnot. Why don't they figure that out in the contract and make them sign that to where this can't happen, to where Ben Affleck can't decide, you know what, I don't want to play Batman anymore.
Right.
Because then that puts them in a horribly awkward position of, well, crap, now what do we do? Do we just recast Batman with somebody else and just hope the audience doesn't care? Or do we start over and make a whole new Batman that has nothing to do with this Batman? I mean, one of the things that they have said about the upcoming Batman movie, which is called The Batman, and is supposed to be directed by Planet of the Apes guy Matt Reeves, who's really, really good. He's supposed to direct this Batman movie, and they've already said that the Batman movie is supposed to be kind of its own thing. Like, it's not necessarily connected with the rest of the DC cinematic universe, which a lot of people even asked, like, well, why is that? Why can't it be connected? And I wonder if this is something where, like, they've known this now for a couple of years. They've known that he's not going to stick around, and this was sort of a preemptive strike. So a very interesting piece of news came out Thursday evening, which was that Matt Reeves, the director of the Batman, has already been talking to his favorite choice, his odds-on favorite choice to replace Ben Affleck, should Ben Affleck decide he doesn't want to do it.
Who's that?
And that's Jake Gyllenhaal. He actually thinks that Jake Gyllenhaal would make a really good Batman. The simple fact that they've been talking about it, he's actually saying that they have spoken about it, that tells me that this is probably further along than anybody realizes. This is probably going to happen.
Jake Gyllenhaal, I mean, you know what? I know some people were a little upset and a little disappointed when Ben Affleck was announced, but Jake Gyllenhaal, are we, I mean, maybe a Spider-Man, but Batman?
Well, I was thinking maybe if he was to play, and again, this is really going comic book nerd on you, because those of you that are listening that don't read comic books, you may be wondering, what is he talking about? But I think that Jake Gyllenhaal could pull off Nightwing.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, if they wanted to do something interesting and not have it just be recasting Batman, they could make him Nightwing. For those of you that don't read comic books, Nightwing was what Robin grows up and becomes Nightwing, basically, right. Is what and Nightwing is kind of like in between Robin and Batman. Like, he's not quite the brooding, fear-mongering guy that Batman is, but he's also not the innocent young boy that Robin is. And I think that something like that could be an interesting thing for Gyllenhaal to play. However, I'm hoping that, as does frequently happen with situations like this, I'm hoping that, they'll dangle a big enough paycheck in front of Affleck and he'll say, oh, all right, I'll do it. I mean, we've seen this kind of thing. I mean, even Robert Downey Jr. has made statements before in the past where he said, like, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to come back and play Iron Man. And he always does.
Right, yeah.
He ends up coming back. But it's because they keep giving him more and more money. And I think that in the case of Batman, the producers probably should look at this in a bigger picture sort of way and say, should we just offer him more money and just not have to worry about taking the risk? I think that's the smart play. So I'm hoping that's what ends up happening here. I'm hoping that Affleck sticks around at least for maybe 2 more films. Like if he does a Batman movie and then maybe like one more Justice League movie or something like that, and then maybe you have a scene in one of those movies where he gives the ultimate sacrifice, like he sacrifices himself and dies in the film, and then that way Batman goes out in an extremely noble way, and that could be the moment where you have somebody else step up and take over the mantle of the character or something. I'm hoping that we haven't seen the last of Ben Affleck as Batman, because even though, as I said, he's not on par with what he did in Batman vs. Superman and Justice League, I still like him as the character. I still am interested to see more of that, so I hope that he sticks around for at least 1 or 2 more films.
Well, I do too. I really enjoyed Affleck. I'm hoping I enjoy him in Justice League. And you brought up Nightwing. What's up? Why no Robin? Is there a strategic reason why we haven't seen Robin in this stuff yet?
I think that the concern is that they're not sure how to do Robin as a character on the big screen
because Chris O'Donnell.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like they tried it in Batman Forever, and honestly, I didn't mind that personification of Robin. I thought that was actually okay, because I thought that was probably the closest that they could get to the comics without making it either too serious or too silly.
Right.
The character of Robin, when you look at it in the comic books, it works because it's a comic book character, but it's hard to imagine that character on the big screen. I mean, the idea of this, you already have to accept the fact that you've got this billionaire playboy that's going out at night dressed like a bat. And now that guy is going to have some young kid going out there with him and fighting crime, and somehow we're going to just be like, yeah, that's okay, I could understand that, I can see that. I almost feel like in today's sensitivity climate, I don't think that people would be as accepting of that.
No.
I think the only way you could really get away with doing Robin in today's mindset is he would have to be a little bit older. He would have to be either getting out of high school or a little past high school. He would have to be like in his 20s or something, and maybe almost like Batman is mentoring him to like again, kind of falling back into that Nightwing archetype of it's not so much Robin but more of like a Nightwing character. And they kind of did that in The Dark Knight Rises, like with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. They kind of started moving in that direction.
Yeah.
I was really hoping that I think a lot of people felt this way, but when The Dark Knight Rises came out, especially with the way that movie ends, I was sort of hoping that maybe that would lead into Joseph Gordon-Levitt in a Nightwing movie.
Oh, that would have been great,
and
yes.
It never did, and it always kind of felt like a missed opportunity. So I think they could pull it off in the sense of if they played it more towards the Nightwing type of character and less the Dick Grayson Robin that we all know. I think if they did it that way, they could make it work. But it's just a tricky character to bring to the big screen. It's one of those few comic characters that just doesn't really translate when you think about how it would work. Like if you tried to place Robin in this Justice League movie, there is no way it would work.
But okay, we need to talk about this because we're running a little bit late. But there was that whole Brett Ratner versus Wonder Woman, gal thing. Please let me know what you know about this whole thing.
Yeah, okay, well, here's the latest on that. So for those of you that hadn't been paying attention to the news, Gal Gadot has said that in the wake of all the sexual allegations, which we talked about previously on here, she has said that Brett Ratner, who is a producer on, a lot of people don't realize this, but Brett Ratner has been a producer on a lot of these DC films with his company Rat Pack Productions. And Brett Ratner was one of the guys that they recently came out with a bunch of stories about how he had a lot of sexual misconduct issues. There's a lot of very well-documented stories about him doing some pretty nasty stuff. And so Gal Gadot had made the statement that she would not come back and play Wonder Woman in Wonder Woman 2, which is already in pre-production, unless Brett Ratner was no longer involved. And it was announced Thursday night that Gal Gadot herself announced it. That she said that Brett Ratner is officially off the movie.
Wow.
And that's huge. That's really huge to have a producer of a film like that. Not only because he's not just a producer of Wonder Woman. I mean, Brett Ratner's Rat Pack Productions produced Justice League. And one of the things I was telling you, Robert, before we started this phone call was that when we sat down to watch Justice League and the Rat Pack Productions logo came up, people were actually booing it. There's definitely some awareness about this as far as Brett Ratner goes. So yeah, this is a huge deal to have someone that their production company and that they themselves were attached as a producer, and to have them removed from a film in the wake of these sexual allegations. That's kind of unheard of in Hollywood history. So, but at the same time, when you think about it, you know, Gal Gadot is sitting there making an ultimatum and saying, "I'm not going to do this movie if this guy's involved." Well, they can't really afford to lose her, can they?
No, absolutely not. And you know what?
They have to give into it.
She does have the power, because while Brett Ratner, and while he's done a lot, I mean, I've enjoyed the Rush Hour movies he's done, and he's a great director. And you know, but the reality is, if we want to see a Justice League movie or a Wonder Woman movie, we need Gal. That's who we need.
Yeah.
Somebody else can produce. Somebody else can do. So yeah, I mean, who's more important? And I'm glad she's kind of flexing her muscle there. And wow, the pendulum is certainly swinging the other way now. And I love seeing this. This is great news, man.
I think it certainly is a positive statement to see that not only are these guys getting called out, but that we're seeing some pretty immediate action. And yes, of course, it's easy to say that, yeah, but this has been such a long time coming. Why did it take them so long to do this? I think that we got to stop thinking in those terms, and we've got to start thinking more in terms of at least it got done.
Right.
At least these guys got called out, and at least they got removed from what they were doing. You know, that's the positive, and hopefully moving forward, this sort of thing can be avoided to where we don't have to go through this again.
Well, that is great news to hear. I'm glad that that she's making a difference. I just want to say, you know, you go, girl, or you go, Wonder Woman. So, very neat. Okay, overall, real quick, as we wrap this up, give us your take on Justice League in a nutshell.
I'm just going to say this. I thought Justice League was fun and entertaining, and I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I saw it, and it was better than I expected it was going to be. But, again, it's far from a perfect film. It does feel like it's missing certain things, and I don't know if it's the kind of movie that is going to withstand the test of time. I think it's a movie that, like, you know, a few years from now when people look back on it, they're going to think it was a bit messy. But for what it was trying to do to bring these heroes together on the big screen, even though the whole process of it was a little bit rushed, they didn't follow the same template that Marvel did with the world building and whatnot. They kind of rushed it together. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So I think that more people than not are going to like it. I think it's going to, you know, satisfy people for what they're going to see it for. But I just don't want people to set their expectations very high, because I think that if you do, you'll end up being disappointed. So if you just want to have fun, you just like superhero movies, it does deliver a lot of what you want.
All right, well, very good. And, of course, we can see your full written review at bigfanboy.com, which is posted now, right?
Yes, it is.
What else you got going on bigfanboy.com? I know you've put up a slew of new trailers. What else is going on?
Yeah, we got a lot of new trailers up there. You can see the trailer for the new movie with The Rock called Rampage, which is based on the classic arcade video game. Do you remember this game, Rob?
Oh,
where you were
yeah.
climbing the buildings and like beating up the building? You were like a giant gorilla or like a lizard or a wolf man, and you're beating up buildings. Do you remember that game?
Like the big King Kong, and yeah, absolutely. That was one of my favorite games as a child.
Yeah,
man.
Well, so they've made a movie out of that game. It's coming out, and it's got The Rock in it.
Well, you know what? That's funny because The Rock is also in the new Jumanji, right? Which is kind of a similar theme. I mean, they go into a video game, right?
That's right. The Rock. You know, and one of my favorite movies that he ever did was The Rundown, which is also set in the jungle. Maybe The Rock should just do movies that are set in the jungle. Maybe there's something to that. Like maybe that's his good luck charm, is like if he does movies that are set in the jungle or whatever. Although Rampage does eventually find its way to the city, so there is that.
Oh, you got to crush those buildings. Heck yeah, man. And then, you know, those... Anyway, I could go on and on about that video game. That's just good old memories, man. Give it up one more time for professional Q&A moderator and speaker, film critic at bigfanboy.com, and show director at the Dallas Comic Show. Once again, Mr. Mark Walters. Thank you, sir.